Hello. Up next, we have Michael from Blockade and Peter from Coin Center to talk about why software development is not a crime in Coin Center's fight with the DOJ. Enjoy.
Thank you. Hello, ETHDenver. So my name is Peter Van Valkenburg. I'm the executive director of Coin Center. Coin Center is an independent nonprofit research and advocacy group based in Washington, D.C. And for the last 10 years, we've been a voice to educate and advocate about these technologies in Washington, D.C., with Congress, with the agencies. And increasingly lately, we've also been bringing impact litigation. We've been suing the government. We sued over the Tornado Cash designations. That case is Coin Center v. Lewellen in the 11th Circuit. We sued over the 6050I reporting requirement. That case is Carmen v. Lewellen, along with Coin Center. The 6050I requirement is if you receive 10K more in crypto, you have to know the social security number of the person who paid you. We think that's unconstitutional search and surveillance. And we're also supporting the Joshua Jarrett lawsuit, where he's arguing that block rewards should be taxed when they're sold, not when they're received through staking or mining. We're also supporting another lawsuit, which is why Michael Lewellen and I are here to talk to you today. So Michael Lewellen is a respected and long-time recognized security expert, smart contract security expert, formerly at Open Zeppelin and now at Blockade. He's also a Coin Center fellow who helped us with some important research, which we'll get to as we talk later today. And he is the plaintiff in a lawsuit against the Department of Justice for their interpretation of the unlicensed money transmission laws, which are the prosecutions they're bringing against Roman Storm and against the developers of the Samurai Wallet in the Southern District of New York. So, Michael, I wanted to start just to talk about your background, sort of what first got you into this space and what's some of the work you did over the years before the lead up to this particular litigation that we'll talk about.
Awesome. So I always like to start out with, I started mining Bitcoin in 2012 on some school computers that no one was using at the time. This is before ASICs just took the game away. So that got me into the whole thing of like, okay, now I have to figure out what this thing is that I've suddenly mined from a computer and created out of thin air. I started to explore it, got into consulting, got really interested in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where I grew up in like kind of going to meetups and educating people and doing consulting. And then eventually I got my computer science degree. I got more into smart contracts as Ethereum launched, and so I got to do a lot of really cool consulting projects with Thomson Reuters, Toyota, Verizon, and then the last 4 years up until recently was working at Open Zeppelin, where we got to work on a lot of smart contract security audits, building secure governance systems, working on access control, trying to figure out how to keep DAOs secure from themselves in some cases.
Pretty topical for right now, yeah.
Yeah. And then, up until recently moved to Blockade to continue to do cybersecurity work in the field.
Yeah, so I sometimes tell people that Michael lived the life I wish I lived. In 2011 or 12, I was faced with this moment one evening when I was living in a small apartment in New York City where I was thinking, like, should I try to install the Bitcoin client and start mining? Or should I study for my contracts exam at law school? And I chose the contracts exam at law school, but our paths diverged there.
It might have been good for you, but the industry's better off since you took that second path.
That's very kind. That's very kind. So, in between when you were leaving your job at Open Zeppelin and about to start your new job, you started working on a software project.
Yep.
A project that Coin Center, among others, would greatly benefit from. Why don't you tell us about Pharos, this protocol that you've developed, and so just so we get an idea of what led to this lawsuit ultimately.
Yeah. So a lot of people in the industry have always talked about like how cool smart contracts are for having like conditional rules, the ability to do interesting fundraising projects. But you never saw a lot of use cases that I think like dumbed it down to some simple terms. And there are good fundraising projects out there, but I wanted to build a protocol that was just very simple. It was just I want to let someone raise money. They want to hit a certain milestone, and we want to give the people funding that project a guarantee that if the fundraising goal is not met, then the funds will be returned. It's very simple. There's really no bells and whistles. The idea is to do that in a very simple process. There's no like dependencies. There's no like bells and whistles. It just does that.
So it's kind of like Kickstarter, but non-custodial, right?
Exactly, yeah. It's essentially a non-custodial Kickstarter built very simply on the Ethereum blockchain.
And something that we had talked about before, and in general, was donor privacy. Because when Coin Center decided to sue the OFAC, Treasury, on the Tornado Cash sanctions, the reason we had standing to sue was because the sanctions forbid us from receiving donations using the Tornado Cash smart contracts, because those were now sanctioned smart contracts. And Coin Center is entirely legitimate, legally incorporated nonprofit in the United States. We're a political advocacy organization. So you have a First Amendment right to donate to our cause, to associate with us politically, and actually to do it privately. But a lot of on-chain fundraising tools don't have these privacy features. So one thing that, because Michael and I have talked about these things for a long time, we said is like, well, wouldn't it be cool if you could have a non-custodial Kickstarter that was also good at protecting donor privacy? So that's another aspect of the protocol that I was really excited when I first heard about Michael working on it. But sadly, for us, who want to use this protocol, for Michael, who would like to publish this protocol, and for anyone else who would benefit from this protocol, you are not yet publishing this protocol. Let's shift, before we get to why, to Tornado Cash. So Michael and I actually were together at ZCon when the sanctions on the Tornado Cash were announced. It was one of the few in-person ZCons, the Zcash conference, and it was in Las Vegas. And Michael, why don't you tell the story from your perspective, actually, of when I went to find you and why?
Yeah, I mean, I remember we're in the middle of one of the most privacy-centric crypto conferences that occur. And, you know, when the Tornado Cash sanctions came down, it was like, you know, basically throwing a rock at a hornet's nest. Everyone was very concerned, and everyone was asking Peter, so Peter, what does this mean? You have a talk later today. You'll surely cover this.
Yeah, Jack Gavigan of the foundation was like, Peter, you'll give an emergency address, right? And I was like, look, there's a lot of hard questions here, and I'm not an expert in smart contracts. I need to know what's actually been sanctioned by OFAC. So
yeah, so I took a quick look, and here, it wasn't just like what is sanctioned, but also like how much of this is immutable. There's a DAO, there's a token, there's all this like stuff moving around. Like, are we talking about a protocol that is like legitimately decentralized? Which, like, spoiler alert, it is. There's a more complex answer, which is why we had to write, like, I don't even know how many pages it would be, but a very long explainer later. But, like, yeah, the core part of Tornado Cash is immutable and decentralized and no one has custodial control of funds.
And Michael's modest. Like, within an hour, he had a detailed spreadsheet for me of which of the actual contract addresses were immutable, which of the contract addresses might be controlled or in some ways accessible to the DAO as they change things. And that analysis was really the foundation of what ultimately went into the two lawsuits, Coin Center's lawsuit against Treasury and the Van Loon plaintiff's lawsuit against Treasury, saying, look, you don't have statutory authority to sanction an immutable smart contract. Because OFAC has the authority from Congress to sanction a person, a foreign person, or the property of a foreign person. And an immutable smart contract, which the Tornado Cash pools are, is neither the property of a person nor a person itself. It's something out there in the wild that is actually inaccessible to any person and doesn't, and Michael helped confirm this very quickly, benefit any sanctioned person or foreign person. So it's actually outside of OFAC's jurisdiction to add those addresses to the specially designated nationals list.
I mean, yeah.
And This legal reasoning and this technical understanding of the on-chain mechanics is what ultimately led to the victory of Van Loon, the plaintiffs in the Fifth Circuit, where the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said, yep, you're right. OFAC doesn't have the statutory authority to sanction those addresses. And we're still waiting for a remedy in that case, but hopefully within a few months, the court will say, we're invalidating those sanctions nationwide. Americans are free to use the immutable pools again. So thank you, Michael, for that work. A few, actually, almost a year after the sanctions were announced, there was another announcement, which was that the DOJ was pursuing criminal charges against Roman Storm, one of the developers of the Tornado Cash smart contracts. The sanctions in general, the prosecution of Roman Storm, also the prosecution of Alexei Pertsov in the Netherlands, as a developer in this space, working on these projects, working on things like Pharos, what do these prosecutions do to your state of mind, to your desire to actually continue to work in this space the way you want to work in this space?
It ramps up the terror considerably. I mean, the last week, most developers are usually like more scared of North Korea than the U.S. federal government. But like during those times, seeing those prosecutions, there's generally a question of like, which one should I be more terrified of? And it was primarily because it just wasn't clear. I mean, prior to that, like it seemed pretty clear that if you didn't have custodial control of funds, like you weren't a money transmitter, because the whole idea of transmitting money is that you yourself have it and move it to somewhere else. And so the fact that that was now an open question, and it was just a question of like supposedly just whether the DOJ likes you or not, or considers like what you're doing to be like criminal, and therefore like basically someone else is using your tool to do criminal activity, whether you're liable for it. I mean that's a big open problem that like a lot of developers had to question. So obviously I'm questioning that. Like I'd love to build a protocol, but if someone just sends money to it or uses it in a way that could be connected to criminal activity, I'm suddenly liable. Even publishing the code, like I mean, even though I would hope it never gets to this point, but like the Tornado Cash code got taken down from GitHub for a while, just out of fear that simply publishing the code would be a problem, which is why I haven't yet published the Pharos code. As much as I would love to, and get feedback from people, and probably get more third-party review before I deploy it and actually have people use it. Like just publishing it would be a concern, because I don't know if the liability is going to come back on me, because there's this massive can of worms out there that hasn't been like clarified of like, am I a criminal for giving someone the ability to move money in a way that I have no control over?
Yeah, and I think that's the right legal analysis, unfortunately. If you look at the briefings in the Tornado Cash prosecutions and the Samurai Wallet prosecutions, you don't find a nuanced interpretation of the unlicensed money transmission laws, where they say, well, look, if you knowingly move money for North Korea, you're going to jail. Like that would be a reasonable prosecution, I think, if you knowingly move money for North Korea. Instead, they say, if you're doing money transmission, which we define as any facilitation of the movement of funds on chain, and you don't have a license for doing money transmission, then you are effectively strictly liable for a federal felony. And so that's a wildly dangerous interpretation of the criminal law, but they've been abundantly clear that that is their interpretation of the criminal law. And so I don't blame you. Like if I was a software developer, I also would not want to publish things that might facilitate the movement of funds on chain right now, because I don't want to end up in federal prison.
And if it's not clear, like this is like applying to almost every booth that's over in the room where a lot of people have sponsored here at ETHDenver, it applies to the people that are building. I mean, heck, for a while, the Treasury was listing testnet contracts under their OFAC list, which I feel like this is like pretty wild and would probably never happen. But the fact that like they didn't even understand that these testnet contracts were not being used to move actual criminal funds because they're testnet. They're not. None of the funds are actually worth anything. But like, is there a scenario where the government could interpret the law and tell someone that like just by allowing money transmission to occur, even if the money's not real, like it just opens so many cans of worms. Where I'm like, where does a liability end? It doesn't seem to have a clear line.
And so that's why I think Michael is a hero for deciding to stand up and actually, nobody wants to stand up in that environment, because It's not a pleasant experience to bring a lawsuit against the Department of Justice. They're pretty expert in lawsuits, so you better be serious about your challenge, and Michael really is, which is why Coin Center was 100% on board with supporting his challenge. So Michael's challenge is Lewellen v. Garland, because it was brought at the very end of the Biden administration against the former Attorney General Garland. And I think it's a great name. I think it sounds like something out of like a 1920s noir film or something. Lewellen v. Garland. But the challenge, the challenge is really important, as much as I joke about the name. It says basically three things. It says, look, the DOJ is outside of its statutory authority when it's bringing these prosecutions, and their statutory authority should not require Michael to go get a license or registration before publishing his protocol and maintaining a website for his protocol. It says that if it is in the statutory authority for them to bring these prosecutions, then we have a massive due process constitutional deficiency here, because FinCEN, the federal regulator for licensing and registering money transmitters and doing AML KYC, actually said clearly in 2019 that non-custodial developers don't have to get a license. So you've got one part of the government saying one thing and the other saying something contradictory. That's a due process problem. People should be aware of their obligations before they end up on the wrong side of a prosecution. And third, it says that if there is statutory authority to bring this prosecution, it violates the First Amendment, because Michael is, at root, a scientific researcher, a developer of new tools for new ways of human flourishing, of making donations to political advocacy groups, of work like this. And if America's not going to be a welcoming home for people like that, then we've abandoned all of our First Amendment principles. So, Michael, I'll let you have the last word if you want one.
I hope that the future brings, honestly, good fortune to not just this case, but everyone who's building in the space. And we've got a new administration, and there's kind of a new energy in the air. But we're still not quite sure where it's going. We just have hopes, and I hope that, like, both, not just my lawsuit, but anyone else. Like, we've seen a lot of lawsuits now that are being closed out with the federal government. I don't know what that means for mine necessarily. It's a different part of the government, but I'm very hopeful. And if not, then it's just going to be a long fight that hopefully means that other people can build safely. And so the sooner we get that, the better. And yeah, I want America to be the place where people feel comfortable building, not the other way around.
So join me in thanking Michael Lewellen for his bravery. And that's it for us. But we do have one more thing in the vein of a good tech conference. I'm very happy to welcome to the stage Brian Klein, who is also a hero in this space. Brian is Roman Storm's defense attorney in his incredibly important defense of the prosecution for unlicensed money transmission, among other charges in the Southern District of New York. So please welcome to the stage Brian Klein.
Nice to see everybody here. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Michael. And thank you for the good fight you're putting up. I just want to say hi real quick for myself, but also my client wanted to say hi to everybody here at ETHDenver. And so they're going to play a short video. He typically would come to this conference, but cannot now. So I think they're going to start this video now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Roman Storm, co-founder of Tornado Cash. I hope you're all having a great time in Denver this year. As many of you probably know, due to the ongoing defense of my case in Southern District of New York, I sadly cannot be with you all in person this year. ETHDenver has been my home since 2018. I've always loved meeting and talking to various people, founders, builders, hackathon participants. I believe it's a very magical place, and it's a very, very special place to me. And it's great to see how this community keeps evolving despite all the obstacles that we've faced together. I just wanted to join you briefly to say that I really miss everyone. And I'm very thankful and grateful for all the support I received from this awesome community. It allowed my defense team to turn over every stone in defending me. And it's been overwhelming, and it has kept my spirits up. We will never give up the fight. And I wanted to ask you, please, folks, keep building. And remember, privacy is not a privilege. It's our right. Thank you.
Yes, thank you everybody who's been so supportive of Roman and the effort and the fight we're having. Trial starts mid-April, and please keep up the support. Thank you.